Video games. A common worldwide pastime, hobby, and job for some who are lucky. They've been helping many of us at the end or beginning of our days relax our minds. In some cases, they have been fantastic learning tools when it comes to history, hand-eye coordination, and artistic expression. One of the many fantastic storytelling devices up there with movies and books, single-handedly inspiring all violent events around the world, because there are absolutely no other influences that could possibly cause all of this violence. Today, we are going to be talking about some of the perfect video games to make your decision of whether it's me or the PS5. What games do you think are the most perfect? Well, this is my video, so I'm going to be telling you what I think, and my opinion is 100% the truth. Why, hello, I'm Jack Brunót, and I talk all things art and entertainment, not just games. But today I'm going to be giving you some video game recommendations that I think are perfect 10 out of 10s. First, I think it's important that we define what a perfect 10 out of 10 game is, because we might have a different definition. The way I define a perfect game is, if you were to give me the option to change anything about it, I would not. I wouldn't change a single thing about any of the games we were talking about today. This doesn't mean every single game we're going to be talking about is this huge life-changing experience. For example, the short puzzle game Unpacking, I would say, is a perfect game. However, my favorite game of all time, The Witcher 3, is not going to be on this list because I would change things about it, even if it is just nitpicking. This list isn't necessarily all of my favorite games ever. They're all definitely up there on my list. The way I see it is a perfect game is something that nails its premise to a T and is enjoyable throughout the entire process. I would also make the argument that each individual game needs to mean something to the player, which makes this entire topic very subjective. I'm sure there are some people out there who think the Lord of the Rings Gollum game is perfect. Okay, maybe not, but my point is this is not an objective list. I'm gonna try to back up my claims as best as I can, but ultimately this is up to the beholder. I have played a lot of games and we're only talking about 13 in this video. I also eliminated a lot of my favorite games of all time because even if they're not perfect, they can still hold a special place in my heart. So if you believe I missed a perfect 10 out of 10 game, maybe I haven't played it, or maybe I disagree with you because we are two different individuals with different opinions and life experiences, and that is okay. Frankly, that is the beauty about a video like this. But of course, keep in mind, I have not played every game ever. I'm sure this will be an ever-changing list, and it's possible if you were to ask me a year from now if I still agree with all of these picks, I might not. As I said, I would love to hear some of your picks, but this is going to be a spoiler-free video, so if you could keep it spoiler-free in the comments, that would be fantastic. This is supposed to be a recommendation video. I want people to be able to come into this video, get some recommendations, and not get spoiled. The first game we are talking about today is... As you can imagine, every single game on this list is going to be a 10 out of 10 in every single aspect, whether it be gameplay, story, characters, art style, etc. But what I also look for in my personal perfect games is a story that has impact. And this is easily one of the most impactful stories, not just in games. We follow Joel Miller and Ellie Williams in a post-apocalyptic world after a zombie-like outbreak forced the world to a heel. However, Ellie is special because she is immune to the virus, so Joel must safely transport her across America to the people who can harness a cure with Ellie's help. The Last of Us explores loss, parenthood, and personal connections in an all too familiar zombie-like story. I'm not really a big fan of zombie stories. I feel like it's really been overdone in Hollywood, so that should tell you all you need to know about how amazing this game is. I think the reason it works despite the zombie setting is because it's not really about the zombies, or as they call them in the game, the infected, because they are kind of different to zombies. It's much more about our humanity as opposed to just a typical survival horror. It is a tight 15 to 20 hours with no filler, which is personally my favorite length for games. If you're an avid gamer and you have not played this game yet, you should really fix that. I mean, if you don't have a PlayStation or a powerful PC, I can't blame you though. I got to play this game for the first time in 2023, which is way too late. I could have had a lot more playthroughs done by now. This is the type of game that will make you want to play it at least once a year, and I very well might. The next game we are talking about is I'm just kidding. I think this game gets a lot more hate than it deserves. I think people just don't really understand what they were trying to do with it. But I mean, it's not perfect. It's got some serious pacing issues. Anyway, let's move on. I have a love-hate relationship with Hollow Knight because it is just brutally hard. Definitely one of the hardest games I've ever played. Not the hardest, though. Insert Sekiro. I'm not going to hold its difficulty against it, though, because if you can master its mechanics, you are in for a masterpiece here. The first thing that has to be said is the art style. Look at it. It is beautiful, airbrushed, drawn 2D animation. The gameplay is just as fluid as it looks. It's quite simple, but has a lot of options when it comes to build and abilities. At first glance, you might think it's boring because you only have one weapon, a nail, along with some magic spells. But since it is a Metroidvania, you will be getting a continuous flurry of abilities as you explore the expansive world of Hollow Nest. Outside of just the difficulty, like a Souls game, the story is very ambiguous, but if you seek out what it's trying to tell you, it is very compelling. Definitely up there with one of my favorite video game stories, despite the main character not saying a thing throughout the entire game. It is very difficult, but it is also balanced. There is never a point where the difficulty spikes or drops. It's definitely a nail biter, but it's nothing crazy. Next, we are talking about a much easier game, that being one of the indie darlings of my generation, who follows a man who becomes a fire watcher to escape his problems. The gameplay is not overly complicated. It mainly involves walking from place to place and decoding what is going on. Firewatch is filled with paranoia. In fact, that is the entire point, to make you paranoid. And with a 4-hour runtime, if you were to play this, say, early in the morning and you play it all in one go like I did, you will feel that paranoia under your skin. It has a brilliantly crafted story with a nice cryptic twist at the end that you can uncover over the course of its runtime. Not to mention, of course, its breathtaking visuals. I think all of us gamers have at least seen screenshots of the cover of this game, the beautiful orange set upon the forest and the fire-watching perch. There's no denying that Cyberpunk 2077 has had a bumpy road, to say the least. Despite its brilliant comeback, it will never truly be able to escape its launch day. I remember playing it on day one and I was unable to get out of the prologue, but I did not give up on it because even then I saw the beauty between the lines. I had such a deep respect for CD Projekt Red, the developer of this game, because of the absolute brilliant masterpiece that was The Witcher 3. So I kept trying and trying, and over the years, patches kept going through, and now, it is perfect. But minus the bugs, I actually think it was perfect day one, and I know what I just said doesn't make any sense, but Cyberpunk just has this beautiful charm to it. Night City, its world, draws you in with its realistic nihilism, the on the edge of your seat tension throughout the streets. The characters and the world felt like real people. I have never truly experienced a game like this since, and I don't know if I ever will. This game just has a specific magic to it that I don't think will ever get captured again. And the fact that the developers did not give up on it makes me so proud to have been a day one player. So many AAA developers these days will release unfinished games and then abandon them for their next project. But CD Projekt Red is not that type of developer. They wanted to save their reputation, and I do believe that they did. They fixed all the bugs and they improved upon already a fantastic game, then releasing what is now considered to be one of the greatest DLCs of all time. Cyberpunk is set in a cybernetic world where people get technological advancements done on their bodies, switching out their arms, their hearts, even sometimes their skin, improving upon their bodies, making them into lethal weapons, or being forced to turn their bodies into corporate puppets. Cyberpunk 2077 is used as a warning towards our current society, not just with cybernetic enhancements, but also capitalism. I think every one of us who has played through the game will remember the Johnny Silverhand speech.
I saw a corpse strip farmers of water and eventually of land. saw them transform Night City into a machine fueled by people's crushed spirits.
Cyberpunk 2077 will live in my brain rent-free for the rest of my life. If you like fast-paced open-world first-person shooters, this is a need to play. But if you're on the fence, but you're a fan of anime, you can check out the animated series Cyberpunk Edge Runners on Netflix. One of Telltale's more popular games right behind the Walking Dead series, which is fantastic, but I wouldn't say is perfect, and I think we can all agree with that. The Wolf Among Us is a tight 5-chapter run, coming in at about 10 hours. If you're unaware of their formula, these are choice-based games in which your dialogue options and actions make an impact on the story. The Wolf Among Us follows homicide detective Bigby Wolf, aka the Big Bad Wolf, as he is investigating a murder within Fabletown. You see, all of these fables were forced to leave their homes and immigrate into New York City, where they have to hide their identities and blend into society. This is a fantastical crime thriller with so many brilliant twists and turns. If you are a fan of crime thrillers, try this one out. It is such a weirdly unique take on the genre. Even if you're not into video games, which chances are if you're watching this you are, but I think this game is really easy to get into. I've personally turned some people in my life into gamers with this game. The mechanics are very easy to understand. You pretty much just walk around, find clues, and make choices. And I feel like it doesn't really need to be said at this point, but I mean, look at the graphics. They are beautiful. I love the comic book style graphics that Telltale Games works with. One can only hope that The Wolf Among Us 2 will come out, as it's been teased over the last couple of years. Please. Please. The next game we are talking about is the debut game from indie developer Nomada. Gris is a tight 4-hour puzzle platformer in which we follow a woman who just lost her mother as she goes through the grieving process, symbolized through colors. Its premise is simple and has definitely been done many times before, but something just grips a hold of you and just does not let go. The best way to describe this game is therapeutic. Gris has such an important message, highlighting the need to truly feel the emotions when going through grief. I'm not promising that playing this game will take away all of your problems, but I can only hope that it could give you some therapeutic relief like it did for me in 2023 when I experienced it for the first time. I was not really the biggest fan of puzzle platformers before I played Gris, and now I'm gobbling up as much as I can. Speaking of puzzle platformers, on the opposite spectrum of Gris comes this horror puzzle platformer, Little Nightmares 2. The first game was very close to being perfect, but I think they really nailed it with this sequel. You follow Mono, this little guy, as he guides his friend Six through a monstrous world of atrocities. This is just another game on the list where there is no dialogue, yet the storytelling is so compelling. I have always found stories with no dialogue that can communicate such an emotional story to be so interesting. I would not be talking about this game if it was just a typical horror game where we see Mono and Six trying to escape these monstrosities. This is a spoiler-free video, but there is a fantastic twist at the end that feels like an absolute gut punch. I have never been so emotionally connected to two characters that don't even speak, and I know Little Nightmares 3 is coming out and it's not going to have Mono and Six in it, at least from the information that we've been told so far, and personally, I think that is a huge mistake. I'm not saying they have to be the main characters of another game, but I would love to see some sort of closure for their story. I'm getting besides myself. You should go check out Little Nightmares 1 and 2. You could technically just play this one, but I think it'll be more impactful if you play both. And the first game is also fantastic. It's just not perfect, and that is okay. Now let's talk about the most underrated game on this list. From Supergiant Games, the same developers who made the hit roguelike Hades, comes its predecessor, Transistor. While these two games do have a similar art style, their gameplay is far from the same. Hades is a much faster paced game, where Transistor almost takes a turn-based approach to the combat, but it's not actually turn-based. It's really hard to describe to you what this game is like without you just going out and playing it, because I've never played something like this before. And I think that just adds to how perfect it is. I feel like we will never get to see a game like this ever again. The closest game that I could compare this to, and this is a very light comparison, would be the recent Final Fantasy VII remakes. On top of the addictive build experimentation gameplay comes a heartbreaking story about a woman and her pet talking sword. Everything about its universe will make you want to immerse yourself fully, reading every single character and weapon file you can find. The biggest shame is that it is only about 10 hours, but it does offer a vast amount of replay value. Let's talk about another game that should have been much, much longer. Death's Door is a Zelda-like Metroidvania. The combat feels so satisfying yet challenging, but once you master it, you are going to feel like a god. We follow the fledgling, a crow who is a part of a Reaper society. Without any spoilers, the Grim Reaper, or should I say Grim Reapers in this story, are the crows. But for some reason, all of a sudden, people stop being able to die. So the fledgling goes and investigates and uncovers a conspiracy that reaches across countless realms. This story showcases the struggle with the powers that be and how we all deal with death in our own ways. It also has a surprising level of humor that I actually found myself laughing out loud to, which comedy is not really a thing that I typically go for in any medium. It's just not my thing. Don't get me wrong, I don't want my stories to just be super dark and depressing at all times.
I'm vengeance.
But I have to say it really works. As I said at the beginning of the video, Unpacking is a perfect game, despite how simple it is. We follow a woman throughout different phases of her life as she moves from place to place. Each level is a different year of her life and you're tasked with unpacking her things and organizing them into her new home. The gameplay, it's just so relaxing. It scratches this perfect itch in my brain. I love organizing things, maybe a little bit too much. But why should I organize my home when I could organize a fictional character's? I also find how the story is told to be very compelling. We learn so many things about this woman based on the items that she brings to each of her new living quarters and where you are ultimately allowed to put them or not. Next, we have a game that honestly I wasn't even planning on playing until one of my friends lightly suggested. He forced me to play it, okay? He forced me with a gun, and now I'm happy about it because it's perfect. I am not the biggest fan of traditional platformers because I've always found them to be way more of a pain in the ass than they're worth. That's just a personal opinion, a factual personal opinion. But Celeste truly is starting to get me to open my eyes a little bit more. In Celeste, we follow a girl named Madeline who is trying to climb Mount Celeste. More or less, that is basically it. Except climbing a mountain is never an easy feat to accomplish. She decided to go on this quest after a painful breakup, and she must persevere through her panic attacks and mental health issues to get to the top of the mountain, reconciling with a dark part of herself to accomplish the goals that she has set upon herself. Celeste has a heavy emphasis on perseverance, showing that just because you have mental health issues does not mean you cannot accomplish something. You do not have to listen to the negative sides of your mind when they tell you you cannot do something. Now, as for the gameplay, it's really hard. While it doesn't have combat, the platforming is quite difficult. Every failure, every death will come to pass so quickly, emphasizing failure in the gameplay mechanics. Set to a brilliant soundtrack, Celeste is a 10 out of 10 game that if you don't think it's your thing, just know that I didn't think so either until I finally gave it a try. And I am so glad I did. Now we are going to talk about my favorite horror game of all time. No shade to horror games, but oftentimes I have noticed the stories are convoluted or oversimplified to focus mainly on What I love about Soma is that it finds the perfect balance of a compelling story and the scares. It is by no means on the level of terrifying like the game Outlast, but the gameplay is very similar. For the most part, you are just walking around, doing puzzles, and looking over your shoulder. We follow a man, Simon Jarrett, shortly after a brutal car crash. In hopes of curing his brain bleed, he then goes to have an experimental brain scan done. However, the moment he receives the brain scan, he wakes up in a mysterious underwater facility years later. Soma follows what it means to be human and what it means to be alive in one of the most compelling and impactful stories that I have ever experienced. I know I said that same thing for The Last of Us, but I mean, we are talking about perfect games here. That's bound to be a little bit of a trend in this video. Even if you're not a fan of horror, I highly encourage you give this a try. It might not be for everyone, but I do think when it comes to its premise and execution, it is perfect. Now to our final game of the video, we have the second game from the indie developer Nomada, the same developers who made Gris, a game that we already talked about earlier in the video. We have Neva, a game that has a similar art style, but honestly is kind of a different genre of game. While Gris was a puzzle platformer, Nia is an action platformer with some puzzles. We follow a woman and her pet wolf as they battle an infection that is coursing through the forest where they live. Everything I said about Gris can really be said about this when it comes to how fantastic it is, but I actually think the story is even better here. The way you get attached to the characters, despite, once again, there being no dialogue, I swear that's not a requirement for a perfect game. It just happened to be that way, okay? The way you get attached to these characters is so breathtaking, and this is such a beautiful yet emotional story. The twist at the end is enough to make a grown man cry. And I think more grown men should be playing games like this because, frankly, they're not appreciated enough. Grown women should play more of these as well. So should kids, because I think it's rated T or it's rated E. Game responsibly, but also play this. Noticed how most of these games were indie games, and also some of them didn't have dialogue, but that has nothing to do with it. I have some theories on why that is, but I think we can leave that to a future video. Let me know in the comments if you have some theories on that. But also remember, I want to hear some of your personal 10 out of 10 games. If you are still here, thank you so much for watching this video in its entirety. I post 2 videos a month, always on Fridays, so if you liked this one, you might like some of the others. So please stick around, subscribe, maybe click the bell, whatever you want to do. However, before you click off this video, I just need you to remember something. Don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do with your life. Stay safe out there. A boo-bye.